people really do know what they're talking about when it comes to model-driven apps. So I really wanted to try and make sure that this is really targeting those people who are less familiar with what a model-driven app is, and also, you know, what CDS is, which underpins it. So a little bit about me. So I'm an Office MVP, SharePoint side rather than Biz Apps side, but I've kind of fallen into Power Platform from the SharePoint side. I have been a developer for a long time and a DBA for a long time, so I do come from that background as well. I work for a consultancy, so I work for CPS. I am the hat of grey hat beard, and most of the time you'll find me with a hat on. And I help run the London Power Platform user group. So what am I going to go through? So I'm going to go through a bit about how we get here, because I think the journey to what the platform is when it comes to the Power Platform, and in particular what the Common Data Service and model-driven apps offers, for me, it covers the last 20 years of my development before I was told I'm not allowed to work on proper development anymore. And so I'm going to go through, you know, how did we get here? I'm going to go through what Common Data Service is, and I'm going to go through what a model-driven app is, because the two are almost interchangeable. There is a tight dependency on them. And then I'm going to go through a bit about when we should use a model-driven app, and I will mention the L word, that licensing word at the end, just to clarify that. And I'll throw in a bit about Oakdale as well, because that's kind of a new sort of interim step. So a little bit about how we've got here. So as I say, I started off as a developer. I started off in ASP, so even before C# and all those lovely .NET languages. But I was also a DBA for many years, and I designed and built solutions. So the designing of solutions is what I've been doing for a very long time, although I don't do it anymore. So when I think about how we've got here, you know, when I started, I was working on client server solutions that hooked up to mainframes. And then we had SQL 7 release, SQL Server 7, which was a lovely tool, and we started learning SQL and not leaving it to all the mainframe developers. We also, when SQL 7 came out, we had a bit of a transition over to BI. So we started actually using not just the data, but actually presenting it as information and using it as information. Is that muted? Cool. And then we kind of went from client server having laptops, and we started getting a bit more mobile. Didn't make too much of a difference, but we were then thinking about, you know, well, do you have connectivity? Can you connect? We started thinking about the concept of having offline. You know, can you do things when you're on the train, when you're on the plane? And then we suddenly swapped over to mobile phones, and it's like, whoa, wait a second. Now this is a whole different platform, isn't it? I'm not now just looking at a web browser. I'm looking at maybe apps and all sorts of other tools that I can use on a phone. I can use cameras. I could use GPS. There's all sorts of different things that we're actually looking at using now. And then if you think forward, you know, we're looking at augmented reality and virtual reality. And it's the reality of our time that, you know, we're still looking at having fundamentally somewhere to store your data. We're looking at how we transform that data into intelligence, or still have a way of capturing that information. And then we have multiple formats that we're actually presenting that information in, and actually working with that information in different ways. And if I think back, you know, what did we need? We used to need SQL servers, web servers, BI servers, a mobile app, a VR or AR app. All of these needed a different set of people who understood the technology, understood how to build it, understood how to then integrate these things. We needed to support all of these different servers. We needed our high availability, disaster recovery, all of that stuff in place, which often meant that we had loads of different places that we needed to have different skill sets. And that makes for a very complicated ecosystem when you're actually trying to design, build, manage, own, and evolve a solution. So what we get to when we get to the Power Platform is essentially looking at something that tries to bring all those together into a single platform. And it's not, you know, we're not talking about one person being able to do everything. We're still talking about different skill sets. It's a big platform, but it's a single platform that is much easier to integrate between. So what is the CDS? So CDS is the Common Data Service. It is a component within the Power Platform. And when we look at this, we've got some things might be really familiar. Office 365. I think most people are using Office. What is it? 115 million people are using Teams every day. They're pretty much all using Office 365 and other components within that platform. We have Dynamics that people are familiar with, Azure, and then there's all sorts of other apps and data. Now, all of that can be built on top of the Power Platform. So Dynamics is built on top of all of the building blocks. So we've got, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, Power BI. All of those are tools that are used to build other solutions. And underpinning those, we have things like the Common Data Service, data connectors, and things like AI Builder. So when you first built your first app, you probably needed to work out where you stored data, and you probably started with a Canvas app. And if you started with a Canvas app, you were kind of thinking of data as, where is it going to be? Is it external or internal? Internal is stored within the platform, and for Canvas apps, nothing is stored in the platform. It's all external to the app. The app sits alone, and it uses connectors. It uses connectors, and you can't create a Canvas app and say, well, actually, I'm going to store data anywhere without having a connector of some description. And this is really where we get the concept of the connectors connect to all of these different services, but the Common Data Service is actually a data store. It is the data store within the Power Platform. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other data stores that you can use. You could be using SQL, you could be using SharePoint, but they use connectors to actually get the events, write data, read data. It's all done through those connectors. So if you use Canvas apps, if you use Power Automate, you're using connectors to actually wire up all of the information that you've got across all of the different systems. Common Data Service, it's all in one place. We'll come on to how the Common Data Service stores information in a minute, but when we look at the difference between those, there's some key differences as to what we can actually do when we're using those different types of connector or data service. So if we're building a Canvas Power App, we can use either. The model-driven apps that I'm going to show you later, we can only use the Common Data Service. Power Portals, they're designed to look at the Common Data Service, not to use all of those connectors. So that means we can't build a Power Portal that just uses SharePoint as its data source. We're using the Common Data Service. Flows and Power Automate, we're obviously using connectors as well. AI Builder, Common Data Service. Power BI, we can use both. Power Virtual Agents, we can use both. So there's some key differences in terms of what we can and can't do if we're not using the Common Data Service. So what exactly is the Common Data Service? What's in the box? Well, it's a service, so it's all driven by an API. So we're looking at an API that we can access from all of the different primary components of the Power Platform. And then we also, because it's an API, we can access it from other services. So we can Visual Studio, we can actually connect to it using any of the development tools we're familiar with. Now, the API wraps everything up into it. So because it's a service, we're encapsulating all of the security into that service. So we have authentication and authorization, we have auditing, we've got logic in there as well. And this is where, if you think back to where we've come from, we might have had different layers where we're writing different logic. Well, actually, with the Common Data Service, we can write some of our business logic in so that it's exposed no matter where we're actually consuming that service from. So it's a really nice way to actually put the business logic in the same location. And because it's a service, we're not actually mixing it up with the data storage. And I'll come on to that in a bit, but the data storage is separate. So we're really talking about how we're managing our logic in terms of the business logic. And as you'll see when we go through the demo, we're really talking, it's business focused when we're talking about how we're managing the information. So we do have the data as well. Now, all of the data in terms of how we're accessing it. There are multiple ways that we can access it. We can have the data model that applies semantics to it. We can put data validation in. So we've got all sorts of capabilities built into the CDS to allow us to actually manage that data. And the storage is abstracted away. So when we look at the types of data that we might be storing, it's all underpinned by Azure. So the service itself is actually working out, well, what is the best way to store the information that you want to put in this field? If you are asking to store an image or a document, it's going to go for blob storage. If you're trying to put in relational data, it will go for a relational format. So it's really trying to store the information in the right structure, and that's all based on what is available within Azure. We then have integration. So, if you think about what you want to do, if you've written Power Automate flows that are triggered by events, where you want to be able to hook into that, you want to be able to see those events when an item is created, when an item is updated, when an item is deleted. So all of those are built in. It's very easy to actually build out your automation based on that. You can publish webhooks, you can automate data export, you can also automate data import as well. So, and we'll go through some of that because it really adds to the value of the platform when you look at CDS and think, actually, I can get my data in, I can build my logic, I can build my presentation layer easily with a model-driven app, but I can also export that information and import that data really easily. So, as I say, it's built on Azure, so you can extend it with Azure. It is scalable. It's been proven because it does have all of the dynamics. The first-party dynamics applications are all built on Common Data Service. It's got all the extensibility if you want to push information into event hubs, service buses, if you want to extend how you use it based on your development skills, you can do that. And it's also got SQL Server Management Studio access. So you can actually query the common as if it were a database, even though it's obviously stored in Azure. You're querying the service and it equates to essentially a schema that looks familiar within SQL Server Management Studio. So there's lots of ways that we're leveraging the power of Azure for the right type of storage. So, if you think to SQL Server, great tool for relational data, not so good for documents. If you think to SharePoint, great tool for documents, not so great for relational data. Common Data Service is actually picking and choosing what storage mechanism to use, so it's using the right storage for the right content. So what is a model-driven app? Well, we've got all of this great stuff that's powered by the Common Data Service, and the model-driven app basically sits on top of the Common Data Service. So what we have, putting it really simply, we have security. So first up, we've got probably, and I know a lot of you probably have used SQL Server, a lot of you have used SharePoint. They both have different security models. They both have their pros and cons. The Common Data Service has the best of both worlds. So it has security that can go down to column level, row level. It has hierarchical models that can be used. It's got really rich security that allow you to really control what you do with that data. And it's probably more flexible than any other tool that I've come across in terms of how you can actually configure that particular tool and the security for each entity, each column, each row. We talk about entities. This is there's an interesting terminologies here because we talk about entities in Common Data Service, but when you get into Oakdale, they talk about tables. It's a little confusing, but they're fundamentally, we're talking about entities which are defined by having columns and then having rows in them. So they're very similar to tables. We can have data flows. So data flows is basically using the M language and basically connecting to a service, a location, pulling data, transforming it, doing that ETL and putting it into an entity. And then we have business process flows. So the undersung hero of the Power Automate family, you might say. You've got Power Automate, you've got So you've got flows, you've got the UI flows, you've got the business process flows. Business process flows only sit within the model-driven apps on top of the common data service. And the interesting thing about the business process flows is they can span multiple entities, so they can actually do they're really powerful in what they do, and they have a visual element to them as well, which shows up in the model-driven apps. So there's quite a few different things in there and we'll go through all of these in terms of what they are, but they all combine to make the common data service. So when we talk about access control, what do we actually talk about? Well, when we're talking about privileges and security roles, organizations, business units, there's a lot of terms in there that are used to define things that are, if you think about an organization, these define the organization, and then we apply them to the entities, to the columns. So we've got different ways to apply this security onto the different data that we're storing. So there's a lot of words on this screen and it doesn't mean very much. So I prefer to show it as a hierarchy. So if we look at a hierarchy, if you think about an organization, you'll have a business unit and then you might have a child business unit. So if you think about HR or finance, they might have a need to see information that's related to your business, but actually only parts of it. So you might want to keep certain information just for finance and certain information just for HR, or control what they can actually do. Is it read only or is it are they allowed to edit it? So we end up with this hierarchy that we can use and apply that over the data that we've got. And if you come from a SharePoint background, how many times have you been asked, so can you take that list and make it so that only these people can edit these columns? And you kind of look at people and go, yeah, no, not really, not easily. And the same thing with SQL. You kind of say, well, can I do this? Yes, I can, but it's not going to be easy. I'm going to have to put views in and all sorts of other things in there. So the common data service allows us to actually build this out and to manage this, and we can wire it up to Active Directory and dynamic groups in Active Directory, so we can have that synchronization going as well. So where we've got custom security roles, teams, users, teams not being Microsoft Teams, teams being a group of users, we've got all of these, and they can actually be used to build out. So for example, build out different representation of your organization, and within that gives us really powerful ways to actually create data, manage data, but also then to control what people can see, which is very powerful when it comes to data management. So all of that security is layered on top of entities, and entities, as I said, they are very similar to a table. They have fields, so we define those fields. We'll choose the data type for each of those fields. We can define the relationships. So this is it is a relational model. It is not a normalized model though. So if you come from a SQL background, and this got me more times than I care to admit, I think, oh great, third normal form, let's design it like that. And then I get into, actually, no, this isn't the right model for CDS, because we're actually talking about how we, as a user, navigate the information. And it's quite a step change when you kind of look at it and go, I'm going to use these relationships actually to navigate between different entities, and I'm going to use them from an interface perspective. So it can take a bit of getting used to. We've got business rules, so we can put business logic in there. We've got views, so in the same way that you would have, SQL views, you want to choose which columns you want to view, you want to apply filters, you want to order it, same way you do it in SharePoint. We've got views. We can put multiple views over our entities, and users can create their own personal views as well. Very powerful tool. They can easily do it out of the box without you having to do anything, so they can customize their personal views. And then we've got forms. So each entity can have multiple forms put on top of it. And in the form, we can choose, well, what fields do we want to display? How do we want to structure it? Do we want to bring in related information into our forms? So a form isn't just a two-dimensional form. It's actually multi-dimensional because we can have multiple tabs. We can put conditional logic in there. We can extend them. We can put controls in. All sorts of stuff we can do with forms, but it's all built in relation to the entity itself. And then we can also put charts in, so we can actually define some level of reporting against an entity, so that when you're actually in a model-driven app, you can see the reporting based on the entity that you're looking at. So it's it's not just a table. There's far more to it than a table. So once we've got this data, we want to get information in. So I'll show you what the data flows look like, but fundamentally a data flow starts off with, where do I get my data from? And you can see there are so many different ways to get data in. Once you connect to it, you're then just using essentially the M language to actually transform it. So if you've ever done any Power BI, you'll be very familiar with M to actually do the transformation. And then you can put the data into an entity, and then you can set it to be scheduled. You can set it to be manual. And I'll show you what that looks like and how that works. But it's a very powerful tool, because what it means that you can do is, rather than having to rebuild line of business applications that are already in place, you can actually then start to use the common data service to augment systems that are already there, and to bring data from multiple locations into one location, to then actually maybe report on it, or to present it in forms, present it in your apps in different ways. And to give you an example of how we've used this for a university, we actually pulled student data in using data flows, pull student data in from their transactional systems. Works brilliantly. We're not updating it, we're not actually changing it, but we're using it as the core for the systems that we were building, that basically augment what they could actually do. So it's very, very powerful in terms of getting data in quickly and easily. The other element that we have is the business process flows. So where we look at automation, often we will have a life cycle for an entity, and we'll use a business process flow to manage it. And we can put conditions in there. We can say, don't move on until you've done X, or, make sure you've entered these values, and then have a condition. If this value is A, then go to B. If it's C, then go to D. So we can actually put conditional logic in, and we can make these really quite powerful. And because they show up in the interface, it's always visible for users to actually see what it is that we're actually telling them to do, so they can see the status that something's at. So we use this, if you think about Dynamics uses these all the time. I have an opportunity in CRM, and actually what I want to do is to see, well, when was that opportunity qualified? I can see when it was qualified, and then it's moved on, and now I'm building a proposal for it, and now I'm waiting for it to close. I can see that visually. Really good indicator of how that works when you're actually in the interface. Now, the business process flows, we can go through a process, but they can actually span multiple entities. So where you have, say, in the sales scenario, you have a lead, we can actually transform that into an opportunity and take it through to an order. So we can have one process that will go all the way through those, and that can be governed by one business process flow. We can have multiple business process flows per entity, and we can control them based on the security roles. So you might have one business process flow that is for salespeople, and then you might have another one that's for managers, who can maybe take it back a stage and update things and make changes where the normal salespeople can't do that. So you can actually control what people do based on those business process flows. So that's the sort of the main building blocks, and that's really sort of what we're actually looking at building. So let's flip over and actually do a demo of some of this, because it's, let's face it, it's much more interesting than PowerPoint, isn't it, when you actually see something. So before I go on, are there any questions? Let's have a look. Normalization helps in data modeling. Yes, it does indeed. In the common data service, it can confuse you a little bit though.
I have one question.
Yeah, go for it.
On the data flows, I think you've shown something on the data flows that pickups multiple either from SharePoint or from SQL or something. Like when exactly we'll connect with data flows, it depends on like when we working with the multiple data source, or it's just based on the scenario basis that we will talk to the data flows.
So it depends on where you want to get the data. So if you can synchronize the data flow, so you can use a data flow to synchronize data coming into the system, and it can be set up on a schedule, and so therefore you basically say I know I need data from this system. The system is updating data, so therefore I'm going to synchronize it. Or you can do it, as I'll show you in this scenario. I actually use it for putting data in. So test data, I can use it just to put test data in, and I can run that on a manual basis. So you can use them based on how often the data is changing, and what data you actually need to bring in.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Still, I'm looking like exact scenarios, like where exactly we'll apply. It's only like something when we need on the scenario basis, we may get into the data flows. Other than this, like it didn't clarify it exactly. Do you have some small example on this?
I'll show you. I'll go through a data flow and go through setting them up and how I'm using them on this demo.
Thank you.
Cool. So I think the one thing I didn't mention in the previous section was solutions. So the other thing about the Power Platform, when we're using these environments, we can have solutions in here. There is the ALM is still it's coming along nicely, but it is still a work in progress. But basically, we can take a solution and we can put together automation with DevOps so that we can actually deploy these solutions into different environments. So I'm in a default environment. I've got my solution here. So this one's about archery. So it's about recording a shoot. So there's a few things that I've put in here. So I've got a solution, and it has essentially, it's got some entities. It's got a model-driven app. So my interface. It's got my sitemap in there as well. And that's what I've got in here. And basically, this is the data structure. I want to put together the data structure with the entities and the app. I've then got another one that has the automation, and I'll go through that in a second. But to go through this, the first thing that we've got here, so I'm going to start with the entities. So we need to start with an entity, because without any data here, we don't have anything. So if I come into this entity here, so what we have here is essentially these are our fields. So I've got a lot of fields in there. Now I can see that here, if I look at these, some of them are standard, some of them are custom. There's a lot of standard fields that go into this. So those are the ones that if I just create a new entity, they will all be there to start with. And then I can add in custom entities. So I've got custom entities in here, and you can see I've got some lookups. I've got some text. I've got owners in there. I've got all sorts of information in here. And you can also see here, I've got some names. So my naming here, if I look at this, I've got CPSD_shoot, CPSD_name. So some of these, where they're custom, we give them a prefix based on what we're publishing. So we can create publishers here and create these custom prefixes. So when I look at this, I've got a name field. That's my primary name field. So that's essentially, if I see this in an interface, I'm going to be able to click on it, and it will open up this particular row. So in this entity, I'll have a name. I can click on it. I've got lots of things in here. If I want to add another field in, I can add a field in, and I can give it a name. So I'll be imaginative as a former developer demo. And then when I choose the data types, So I've got text data types. So I've got things like email, URL, ticker symbol, phone, auto number. Some of these are pre-formatted. They'll have the validation in there as well to make sure that they're well formed. I have numbers, so I've got durations where I can put in, the duration between two dates, whole numbers, languages, date and time, date only, and then I've got some special ones down here. So customer, so that's going to look up to my customer entity, currency, decimal numbers, files. So where we talked about files being used to be stored, I can put a file in here. Now I've also got image in here as well, so they are different data types. I've got lookups, so if I put a lookup, I'm just saying I want to look up to another entity that is in my my model. And I've got also multi-selection option sets and standard option sets and two options. So I've got different things in here that I can use in different ways. So lots of data types in here. Each of these, the service is deciding, well, how am I going to store the data that's put into this? So I don't need to worry about how I format these. It's all worked out underneath in terms of how it's stored. When I put something like text in there, though, I do get advanced options. So I get things like enable field security. Do I want to actually tie down who can do what with this particular field? I get things like sortable, max length. It still bugs me from my SQL days that that's 100 and not 128 or something sensible. But hey, that's just the way it goes. We don't worry about those things anymore. So I've got lots of things. Yeah.
Can you have sort of custom data types? Could you have, say if you had product or something, I suppose that would be a lookup, would it?
That would be a lookup. So yeah, you don't have custom data types, but the difference between, so where we've got the option sets and the lookup. So an option set is like a defined choice, like a term set. And so we can look at that, or you can do with a lookup and have other information.
Okay, thanks.
So it's up to you how you manage it. As I say, it really comes into its own when you actually start working through the interface. So let's just add this in here. So we've got our demo. We'll save the entity there. So that will save our entity, make sure our new field is in there, a new field column, and it will hopefully save. Demo gods, I forgot to pray to you. There we go. Right. So once that's in there, we can look at relationships. So basically when I put in a lookup, it will automatically generate a relationship for me. I can manually put them in as well. But generally I found that it works pretty well just leaving it to its own course. Certainly the more complex you get, the more you would want to look at how this works. But we get things like business unit, which is a default standard relationship. So we've got quite a lot of information that's already in there. And then we get things that, where we put in our custom ones, and you can see the custom ones with the naming convention, and it says custom. So we can see our relationships. We can put business rules in. I thought I had one in there. Okay, we can put business rules in. We can put views in here as well. So again, we can add custom views. These are all the standard views that come in, but these are used in different ways. So where we have lookup views, that's if we're choosing something. So if we're choosing an archer from another lookup, associated views where we're seeing archers based on, well, which view from something else, and we're looking for the archers, we can use the associated view. So we're condensing maybe the number of fields that are in there. If I go with the active one, what we end up with in here is a really simple interface where essentially we've got our columns. I can choose if I want to order it. I can edit the width if I want to. I can move these around, so I can just drag them around and move them around. And if I want to add columns, so I've got columns here. So it's at the moment, it's just showing the unused columns. So I can just click on that. It'll add it onto the end. And then I can also see related columns. So where I have my relationship between my different entities, I can actually add other things in here. So if I said, well, actually my Archer, I know they have one division, I could add my division in there, just click on that and that'll go in there as well. So I can have lots of different views put together, and I can filter these as well. So I can put different filters, I can add groups of filters, I can add related entities. So I can really be quite sophisticated in how I'm putting these together. I have a nice interface for putting them together, and when I save them and publish them, they'll be visible within the application, within the model-driven app. So it's quite an easy process for us to actually put together the views for each of the entities. And then if I come into forms, again, we've got forms for different purposes. If I come into the main form here, so what I have here is essentially a design interface, reasonably familiar if you've used Canvas apps, but I've got different things in here. So I've got my Archer, I've got general as a tab, I can see the different sections that I've got in here. I've got my new section in here, and if I want to, I can add other things in here. So I can add another tab in, and it will add a tab in there, and I can give it a name. So let's put in 2, and in tab 2, I can come in and I can say I want to have a new section, a 2-tab section, and if I come to my fields, then I can say, well, actually, I'm going to just drag that in there, and I'm quite literally, I can just drag things in and then move them around within this interface. When I have these in here, I get different options based on the type of field that it is. So I can choose to hide the label if I want to, make it read only. There's formatting options if I want to limit the width, and depending on the type of field it is, then I can add components into it as well. So if I wanted to add custom components in there, I can do that. If I have Canvas apps, I can do that. So I can put different information into here. So our form can have quite a lot of yeah, Larry, PCF, that was the word I was thinking of, PCF. The PCF components in there, which is all customizable, so you can create your own component libraries to be used in here. But the form is really easy to build out. And the other thing that I can do in here is, if I want to add something in here, let's just come back up here. So I've got some inputs that I might have, so a bit more interesting than what I would usually have, but I can also add subgrids in here. So if I add a subgrid, what this is asking me is, I want to show related records. Okay, so records that are related to my Archer. So what relationships do I have? And it's basically, it's going through and looking for different entities that have a relationship to my Archer. So if I put targets in, and it'll say, okay, what view do I want? Active targets, and it will put that in, and then I can choose, you know, how I want to show them. So I've got that information in there, and that'll be related to the Archer that I'm looking at. So this is where, when we're thinking about the relationships between the entities, we're also thinking about how we navigate between the different information. And we use that relationship to define our interface elements when we're actually putting these forms together. So I'm going to come back over to my entity. We have dashboards and charts, so I'm not going to go into those in too much detail. Personally, I prefer to use Power BI if I'm looking at this stuff, and then embed Power BI. But you can use charts, and there's all sorts of different ways that you can use that. Dashboards will bring stuff together as well in terms of combinations of charts. I can put keys on here as well. Really useful when we're actually using those data flows to pull information in. And then I can also see data. So if I want to, I can see my data and I can add records in, and I can actually, you know, investigate my data within this particular entity. So our entities are much more than just a table. There's a lot more that we can do with them, and we build this all out to actually as part of the common data service to say we've got this entity and this is all of the logic and the information that we're actually putting in that's associated with this particular entity. So let me just check. Right, so the next thing that I'm going to look at is going to be a bit about the data flows. How do we actually get the information in? So I've got two solutions here. One is the model, so this is the core data, and then I have one that is automation. And what I've got here is I've set up a bunch of data flows to pull this information in. Now, what I've got here is, and this is primarily for demo purposes, I've got some spreadsheets in here. So if I say bow style, for example, so when you're doing archery, you get compound, recurve. Let's put another one in and call it demo, because I'm really imaginative when it comes to demo data, as you may already have gathered. So what I've done there is I've got one table within one sheet, and when I come back here and have a look at my data flows, so I'm going to come into data flows here. Have I heard of Danny Demo? No, it sounds like a nickname I might end up with though. So if I come in here and I say bow style, I can come in and I can edit this. Now, the only thing that I can't do when I come in and edit it is actually the connection. So that screen that I showed you in the presentation, that's already set up to say this is the connection that I'm using. But what I then can do is I can see the data, so I can see where it's come from. And as I say, if you've used Power BI, you know, I'm looking at the source. I can see the source in here. So if I did want to change it, I can change it to a different source if I want to. I'm not doing a lot of configuration and change transformation in here. All it's saying is this is coming from an Excel workbook, and then it's pulling in the data, and it's pulling the data that I want. So I've got my table, and that's it. It's pulling the data in. I could go to town and transform this in any way I wanted to. What it then does is it actually maps it. So I've then got it mapping to an existing entity, so my bow style, and I'm mapping my columns to my destination fields. And then if it ever finishes, it basically, that's essentially it. I can say manually or automatically. If I do it automatically, I can say how often I want to do it. I just have these on manual. So that's as simple as I need it to be. So for reference data, it's a manual load. If it were coming from a live system, then I could be pulling it in every 20 minutes or so. And that really depends on, you know, how much your data is going to change. The same sort of latency considerations that you would have for any other solution. So if I come in here and then that's there, so that's in progress, and that will run through, and that's basically just pulling my data across. It won't push data the other way. You could be using flow triggers to push it the other way, but it won't push it out. And if you need it to export to Data Lake, then there are options to connect and export directly to Data Lake. So therefore, it's very flexible in terms of if I set it up to go to Data Lake, it will just synchronize and it will just carry on working. Is that a question? Do data flow runs count towards general flow runs? Very good question. I don't think the data flow runs count towards flow, but I would have to check. I couldn't say for certain. So let's come back to one more of the entities. So actually, let's come back into my solution. So my automation solution. So the reason I've got an automation solution is I want the data structure to be one thing and the data flows to be another. So one of the things that I have in here is a process, shoot management. So what am I doing for time? Ooh, tight. Okay. So shoot management is basically a very simple business process flow. And what I've got is I've got some information I want. So I want the round to be populated. So I can put that in and say that's populated. I want to have a number of archers. So I've got some checks there. And then I'm checking for archers. And if the number is greater than 0, I can move on to the next phase. And then I've got a flow. So I can trigger flows here. Now I'm only doing the flows, but there are the old-time workflows as well that come with Dynamics. But I'm just sticking with the Power Platform for this demo. So basically, I can trigger a flow when I get to this stage in this business process flow. Now, this doesn't look like a lot when it's in here, so we really need to see it actually in action within the actual model-driven app, because all we've been looking at so far are the underpinnings, the setup of it. So let's come back over here. So if I come back to my app, so I have archery in here. So I'm going to click on that. So now I'm actually into my app. So one of the things that I had was a site map. My site map defines what can I actually have in this left-hand navigation. What can I see here? Because I can have different options, and these basically link to different entities. And they could be linking to other pages, they could be linking to all sorts of things. But fundamentally, I'm looking at this as being a primary tool for managing information and managing data. Line of business application, users can live in this day in, day out, and you've got easy ways to manage the left navigation. I can choose different areas, and I can control this with security as well. So I could be saying, actually, my system admins have access to the reference data, and that allows them to come in and see and edit the data that's in here. So I can see demos come in again. Oh, I didn't have it as update. So I can see demos come through, and I can say, well, okay, this is only for my admins to come in and look at the reference data. Most of my users are going to be in here. Now, what we also see here is a lot of the scenarios where we're actually putting data in, something like Dynamics is great. You use Dynamics, CRM, field service, but that doesn't have to be the only interface. So a lot of solutions we build for clients, we actually build out Canvas apps as well. So we'll build out a Canvas app to capture data and to pump it in here without it having all the bells and whistles of the model-driven app. So where you need an offline capability, it is coming to the model-driven apps, but you might be using a Canvas app if you need to have access to GPS and record GPS or take photos. You would use a Canvas app because you can use the capabilities on the phone. So this is one element of the interface that we can build out. So where we're coming through here, we can say, so let's have a shoot. So I can say, let's create a new shoot. And put that in, test. Again, really imaginative information. Let's give it a date. Let's give it tomorrow. Let's look for a round. So I can choose. So I'm choosing from my lookup here. And I've got that, and it's locked. Okay, that's good. So I can save that, and I have up here my business process flow. So if I save that, I can say, do I have that? Yes, I do. That's great. So I'm going to move that forward. Number of archers. Oh, it's not supposed to be editable. Must be filled in. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. So where I've got my tabs here, for my shoot, I've got archers. So I can come in here and I can see related entities. So if I say new archer, I can say, so who do we have in here? So Larry, let's put Larry in there. So Larry is going to have a bow style of compound and a gender and a shooting style and a division. And I can save and close that. And I've just created a related record. So it's very easy for me to actually come through here and just add stuff in here. And I'm not having to navigate. It's not particularly complex for me to navigate. I can just come in here, choose what I'm looking for, and edit this information. So very easy for me to save and close and navigate between these entities. And then if I want to see targets, so I don't have any targets in there yet, but I've got my 2 archers, and that should, I'm probably waiting for flow. So I've got a flow in the background that will update that. So let's just put that in. So we've got 2 archers in there. Going to finish that. Next stage. So now I've got my other flow there, and I've got run flow. So I'm going to run my flow. Demos, run my flow, done. So hopefully what that's done is taken the information from my archers, and it's, no, it's not, it's running in the background. Demo gods. And then it should just create all of this. Okay, I'll leave that one for a second then. Okay.
Just to say, if you do overrun, that's quite normal for us. I think we did a 60 minutes ignite, which went for about 2 hours, didn't I? I think so. You know.
Well, I'm almost
unless you've got
there.
somewhere to be, of course.
Yeah. Have we ever finished on time? More accurately.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, in that case, I feel much more comfortable now. Okay, so let's just do a couple of things in here. So, there you go. Targets are all created. So the business process flows, we can see the processes. Some of the other things that are really nice in here, we can actually have templates in here. So it's really common to say, actually, I've got all of this information. I want to get it out into something. So I can actually put a Word template in here. So I put a very simple one in here. And what that will do is basically you can put together a Word template, and what it will do is basically pre-populate that template. So I've got my date, my field, number of archers, and that's it. It's really easy to get the information out into a Word document or an Excel document and actually just send that information out. Something that, you know, when you're looking at SQL Server to get it into a document like this or SharePoint, it's not going to be as easy just to get information pumped out into a document. We can also do, you know, we can trigger flows. So my create targets, the flow that was in the other one, you know, I can run that, and that is against a selected item. I can send emails, so I can share a link to this quite easily. I can run reports. There's all sorts of information that I can get out of this relatively easily. Yeah, Larry's just said that there are caveats with the templates. I will vouch for that. There are caveats for the templates, but it is generally easier than trying to pull information and get it out into SharePoint, out into a document from SharePoint. So lots of things that we can do here. The last thing I wanted to show you is to come back here and to go over into the admin center. So we're working with our common data service sits within an environment. So where we've got our environment here, we can see in here all of the entities. Now I'm not in the solution here, I'm actually in the environment, and I can see all of the entities that are in that environment. So there'll be a bunch of stuff that might be coming in from other applications that you're deploying. That's all going to be there. You can see with the naming what's yours or part of your application or from that publisher. But fundamentally, you need to be thinking about the environments that you might be using. Now, when we come into this, we've got various information that we've got in here, so we can see the security roles here. Now, I want to just quickly show you the security roles. I'm not going to go into lots of detail about what they are because they are quite complex. But fundamentally, if I come into the security roles in here, I can see the people, I can see the members. I can edit this, and it see, it always comes back to this lovely interface which everybody loves. And what this basically is doing is saying, well, these are the records, and what can I do with this record? Now, it's got green circles, it's got yellow circles with a segment in there. And this is based on that hierarchy that I was talking about earlier. Green is organization. It's the whole environment. The business unit, we can have a hierarchy of business units. So your HR and your finance and your professional services, they can all be business units, and you can control what they do. So with core records in here, what can I do with these core records? But we can also go through and say, well, against services, what can I do? Against mailboxes, currency, some of the common ones, service management. So there's all sorts of roles that we can put in here. And then eventually we'll get to custom entities. And this is where I can put in all of my custom. So I've got my division there, I've got my archer up here, and I could actually control exactly what every role can do. And all of these are create, read, write, delete, append. So I can get really, really granular around how I can control what people do based on the role. And I think, you know, when people talk about common data service and they start to talk about the licensing, this is the kind of stuff that you're paying for. You're paying for the ability to have this license. You're paying for the data flows to get data in. You're paying for the ability to have this interface, which actually is a robust interface for a line of business application. So you're paying for a lot of things that you get with a model-driven app sat on top of the common data service. So with that, I'm going to flip back over to the presentation. And because I've got a few things to follow up on, because obviously we've had various conferences that have announced various things. And I guess, you know, where this sits now is quite an interesting question, because there is a maturity model now. So we used to talk about Canvas apps, model-driven apps, very different ends of a spectrum. And they were used for very different things with very different cost points. You know, your seeded Canvas apps where you're only using the connectors based on, I'm just using Office 365, so it's just SharePoint and those services. You know, you always had the ability to use SQL, but it was an extra cost for a connector. We now have that interim, that middle point where we've got Project Oakdale. I've called it CDS Lite because it's not the full thing that I've just been showing you. It is a subset of the features and functionality. You don't get the model-driven app. You just get that relational data storage, and it's all contextualized within Teams. So at the enterprise level, if you're looking to build an application that's got that complex security, it's got the data flows, maybe it is integrating with the Dynamics capabilities, those first-party Dynamics apps. Enterprise is the level that you need to be thinking about for CDS and model-driven apps. Oakdale is in the middle. And if I've tried to put together a quick comparison, it's not showing all the things where they are the same. It's showing all the things where there are differences. So there are a lot of things that are the same, but the first thing is you get basic data types. You don't get all the advanced data types. So all of those advanced data types that I was showing you, you don't get all of them. Non-relational storage. So, you know, files, you don't get the option to keep files or images. So that's not there. Managed data lake. If you want to get the information out, you don't have the easy way to do that. It's not going to be mobile offline capable. Paginated reporting. You know, that's a big one with Power BI. How do you get paginated reporting? Well, you need the data, and you know, if you look at the maximum size, 1 million rows or 2 gigabytes. Thinking back to my DBA days, it's not a massive amount of information. So it really you've really got to think about when thresholds like that. If you have a really successful Oakdale solution, at some point you are going to be saying you need to migrate it into Common Data Service, and you can do that. You can migrate them from Oakdale into Common Data Service, but you do have to think about it when you're investing the time to build an Oakdale solution. How long is it going to last? The security and integration, all of that rich security it's not available in Oakdale. You get the owner member guest because you're basically working with teams, and that's the security model that you're working within. You're using the Microsoft 365 groups, and then you don't get any of that hierarchy in terms of the hierarchical security, the field level security. So there are lots and lots of the benefits of the common data service that you're not going to get with Oakdale. Oakdale really is a simple relational model that you can use within a Canvas app, within Teams, as opposed to being that full-scale enterprise solution that you can build using model-driven apps and the common data service. So, when should you use a model-driven app? If you're thinking about it, and the licensing is always comes up. You need to think about a business case. You need to think about how you're actually validating the investment, and it is line of business applications. It's scale of data. And when I say line of business, it's how critical is that application to you? Do you need to have it available all the time? Does it need to scale? Does it need that secured content? Data loss prevention is massive as well. Do you need a different set of data loss prevention policies? Because you can put these in terms of the environments, and therefore you can secure your data based on, maybe this is an HR application, and you've got your security, but you could actually just secure that environment as well. The ability to deploy solutions, you don't have that at the moment with Oakdale. So it's another thing. I can deploy a solution, I can deploy updates, I can layer them up. We build products that are based on Power Platform, but they're layered solutions. So it's a very much richer way to actually deploy your solutions and update them, and you can manage them so that you don't get the creep in terms of people just changing the solutions. You can actually manage them so they're not editable other than through a formal ALM process, which a lot of IT departments very much like that approach. So lots of reasons we can't really escape, the L word, licensing. So, when we look at it, the business case is increasing efficiency. We're not looking to say that the Power Platform is the silver bullet that's going to solve everything. But when we think back to how many different platforms we need to build out a capability, if we consolidate that onto one platform where we've got one cost, we don't have to worry about different servers, different HR, HA capabilities. We don't have to worry about different support skill sets and support teams. We can start to build those together into one set of teams. We're really starting to see some cost savings there. Cottage industry applications, legacy solutions. I've spoken to a lot of IT departments who look at it and go, it's a new Access, isn't it? Or VBA in Excel. Everybody's going to be doing it. Well, actually, no, not everybody's going to be doing it. You can manage it, you can monitor it. The Center of Excellence is a fantastic tool. You can have a maturity model where you're actually moving from, the citizen developer through to a line of business application that is business critical and needs to be stable. You get better integration. It's going to be easier to do certain things. Yes, some things might be harder, but most of the time we're looking at better, easier, quicker integration to get data in, and then you get everything out to a data lake, and then you can manipulate it from there. And you've got mobile capabilities. You will have the opportunity to have offline model-driven apps. You can build, as I say, multiple Canvas apps on top. And I think, when you're thinking about the way that you surface the capabilities, some users may only need a per app license rather than a per user license. So there are different ways to actually license, and some of them are more expensive and some of them are cheaper. But if you're using a per app license, it's 2 cups of coffee a month, and it will make your employees more productive. So there's compelling reasons for it. So quick thing about the roadmap. So this is from Ignite, I think. So direct query from Power BI. So this is really, trying to make sure that we can actually query data immediately from Power BI. SQL access. It's just so rather than waiting for a sync and to load data in, we can just query it straight away. Convergence of Canvas and model-driven apps. So one of the things that we can now do with the model-driven apps, we can put a Canvas app in there, or we can put Power BI in there. We can embed them into our model-driven app, which is a really powerful way to kind of look at reusing your investment in the Canvas model, the Canvas apps that you might be developing for other purposes. So it's a really, really convenient way to actually bring together some of those capabilities. And then the new CDS offline sync capability, which is being rolled out at the moment, to give us that offline access in the same way that we've been able to do that with Canvas apps. T-SQL, it's a service. So the service, the common data service, it represents those entities as tables, makes it easier for us to actually query it, investigate it. If we want to actually pull that data in from into other tools, we can do that as well. I think this will be a really powerful tool because that's up till now, it's been quite challenging to be able to actually just see all the data that we might have. So this is actually a really nice improvement. I'm sure I just talked about that one. No, the reason for this one, direct query. So one of the things that we've had a challenge with is when we're importing data into Power BI is the security trimming. With direct query, all that security will just work. So you can connect, it'll pull the data out relevant to the account that you're using. You don't have to worry about hiding fields, columns. They will automatically be hidden because the service is basically defining the table that's being served up to the user based on the permissions that they actually have. So, in summary, CDS is robust. It's feature-rich storage platform. Model-driven apps, they're built with a proven interface. You know, Dynamics has been using that interface for years. It's been proven at scale. It's been proven to be line of business capable. And I think one of the most important things for me is I can build a model-driven app almost as fast as I can design it. So it's actually really quick to prototype as well and to put things together and to show how the information would work. Easier to do that than sometimes it is to actually put a design together and convince a client of how it's going to work. Showing them is faster and easier. So with that, are there any questions? Are there? So
what about just, you know, if you were wanting to learn this stuff, what resources would you recommend?
So for me, I would go to the Learn platform on the Microsoft Learn. There are exams in this stuff. So the MB200, the Dynamics Fundamentals doesn't go into that much detail, but it gives a good overview of the capabilities. But the MB200 exam covers quite a lot of this stuff, and there's some really good material to help you actually learn this and to try it out. So yeah, really it is quite easy to play with. It's easy. I found it's easy to make mistakes in and to rectify those mistakes. So, you know, trying, failing, and then changing it is quite an easy way to learn this.
Well, MB200 will be retired soon enough. It's PL200. You should be looking for the future.
Thank you, Larry. It is, yes. MB200 had a lot of dynamics in it. PL200 will hopefully just be more of the model-driven apps and less.
It actually still has loads of the dynamic stuff in there, and some people are mortified of how much, but it covers the platform itself, so it includes a lot of model-driven app stuff. If anybody's taking it, brush up on the model-driven side.
Yeah.
Russell's asked, can I test this stuff on an Office Dev tenant?
You would be able to spin up a trial, but you wouldn't have the model-driven capabilities as part of your Office Dev tenant. You
can spin up a dev tenant for it as well.
Is that a separate tenant?
Yes, you can spin up a separate tenant as a dev. It's valid for 90 days, but most often use case is having the trial, and easiest to set up, to be fair.
Dan, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, I was going to ask about something close to my heart at the moment. ALM, what are the capabilities for my sort of tracking changes, migrating them through environments? I mean, changes to the app, changes to the entity model.
So the way the ALM works at the moment is those solutions, you pull the solution down and it unpacks the solution into DevOps. It's probably a subject all on its own, the ALM for the Power Platform. But fundamentally, what you're not managing each component, you're managing it at solution level. And they've got managed solutions and unmanaged solutions. So essentially, there is a pattern for creating a solution in a dev environment, testing it to deploy it into a test environment, then pulling it from the test environment when you know it's validated, and then publishing it into a production environment as a managed solution, which essentially locks it down and stops it from being edited by users there. So of the entities that you can actually edit, you can't do that with a managed solution if those are part of an actual solution. So the entities that are part of a managed solution are locked.
Okay. And can you use DevOps at all? Or
yeah. So you can use. So we use DevOps to do all of that, and it is, I think, from an ALM perspective, it's not the same as other platforms yet, but it's getting there. But yeah, you can automate all of that with build pipelines and do the whole lot using build pipelines in DevOps.
Okay, thank you.
Dylan, you got your hand up?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I've just been trying to think about how this all fits together, because Canvas driven is very much aimed at the citizen developer, isn't it? Or that's been Microsoft's reason for having it, saying it empowers people who are not professional developers. But this is obviously purely aimed at professional developers. Would you agree?
I would say that this is aimed at a more skilled user. So super users sometimes get involved in this, but this is aimed, I see this more as a line of business solution. So you tend to be looking at more scale, more complexity, and it tends to be more managed. So it's not citizen developer. I think the data sources define it for me a lot.
I would say it's probably more of a functional consultant level of the approach. Reason being, there's no development from what you have seen. It's all drag and drop. In that respect, of course, additional development can be added with plugins, PCF controls, JavaScript, and all that. But in terms of managing, it's actually creating the business process within that given interface. That's what matters, and that's where functional consultant probably comes in.
And I think and then you're right, because the certification is a functional consultant, and you can add in the PCF, the framework components. You can add those in. You can add JavaScript in. There's all sorts of development you can do. You can write plugins. There's capability there, but as a functional consultant, you can do all of that just using the UI.
Yeah, but it's outside the scope of the typical citizen developer now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we work with clients who are using this for Dynamics, and they've got functional consultants who know the business capability, who are making changes to the views, making changes to the forms. There's a lot of that going on, and it's kind of like changing the configuration. It's like SharePoint in a way. You have your users who know how to make changes to the layouts, to the pages, but you have some people who are doing the content creation. So that level of sophistication in terms of what they can do, digital champions, they would be the sorts of people who would be able to change things in this. You probably wouldn't get many of them building something from scratch.
Mm.
Is there a dysfunctional consultant? There are many dysfunctional consultants. I think I probably put my hand up as one of those.
Yes, most of us are.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Model-driven apps to Teams. Yeah, so model-driven apps can be put into Teams as well.
So if you were doing sort of, like a lot of the discussion at Ignite was, that sort of citizen developer / the professional developer being able to augment capability for the citizen developer to consume. So with the model driven, then would you build custom connectors, or what is the path to sort of building those if you wanted to connect up to your line of business application which doesn't have a out of the box connector?
So if you look at the data flows as a starting point, to bring data in, you've got all sorts of different tools that are there already, but you obviously have your web APIs. So there's all of the different ways. So you can get data in quite easily, and if you don't have an API, you can build an API. You can put data in using Flow, so Power Automate. So there's lots of ways that you can interact with a common data service. It is a premium connector, but you can get data in quite easily. In terms of getting data out, you've got APIs to get that data out. It is common data service. So you've got all of those development tools and those development endpoints to allow you access to that content. And I think when you look at all of these things, you can get data in from Access. JSON files. I was using the Excel files stored in SharePoint, SharePoint folders. You can do a lot of the automation of getting data in really quite easily here because you've got these data flows already there in place.
Well, I would add that it's not just data flows and interaction. It's there's direct web API that is available to be used with utilizing the code and doing that from web calls as an integration pieces. For example, the project that I've just worked on, and the developer has written a code where they just write the calls in and put the records in. The other options, couple of options are, which one is more kind of non-developer friendly. That would be import wizard. So if you just want to import specific data, you can utilize the out-of-the-box import wizard to import the data. As well as that, there are third-party tools for integration. So SSIS-based tools, something like Kingsway Soft or I forgot what it was called, the other bit more user-friendly in terms of setup. But those tools are also available to be integrated with the system.
Okay, thanks, guys.
So that's why it's good having somebody who knows more about the dynamic side of stuff on the call.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, there's import from it. For all of these in the interface, you've got the import and the export. Choose file, import from Excel.
Thanks.
Cool.
So just to add, I think from security point of view, it doesn't give just the CRUD permissions. It also gives the associate to, share, and assign permissions. So those little circles that you've seen in the security model there, if you scroll to the top, actually at the top it does show append to, assign, and share permissions as well. So that allows to link those records together, or not to link those records together as and when required in terms of security. That does expand vastly on how you can manipulate the data and then, for example, if you say that this person, this security role specifically, could not associate a car to a dealership, let's say, then they will not be able to do that, quite simply. And then the others probably will be able to do that. So those are, for example, append 2. Assign also, the security roles are actually based on the ownership model. So pretty much all the records in the system are owned by something. So it's either system owned or user or team owned. If it is system owned, everybody can see the records. If it is user or team owned, then we can go to this granular level, whether it's only that user or only that team can see those records, or whether they would be that specific business unit and so on. Yet again, this granularity is quite quite narrow. And as I did mention in the chat, is if you ever have to create a custom security role, start from an existing one, take existing one, copy it, and then modify. Because if you do try to create one from scratch, you will fail miserably, as I have done many times.
I can vouch for that, actually. And when you think, because all of these tabs, this is just one security role that I'm looking at here. This is just the system administrator one. So if I do look at a different one, I would have to set up all of this from scratch, and it is very easy to get to the point where you can't actually do what you think you should be able to do, because one of these 1,000 circles is slightly wrong. So yeah, I vouch for that. Copy an existing role to start with, and then remove what you don't need.
Just like permission levels, eh? Yeah.
It is the most sophisticated permission model I think I've come across, and it's incredibly powerful. I mean, I put my hands up. I don't use it to the extent that it could be used. I mean, there's so much that you can do with it. It's incredibly powerful.
Also, on the model-driven apps, I could and should, I think, add that what it does provide is access to the thing called activities, which is, to a certain degree, it allows direct integration with the Outlook elements of it, and it does give an out-of-the-box thing on the forms called timeline. So if you could just give it a show.
Yep.
So if you could insert timeline, here we go. Yeah, and just publish it and show on the form.
Publish.
Yeah, depending on the size of the solution, it can.
It's not a very big solution.
Yeah. By the way, the classic interface publishes it quicker.
I try and avoid the classic interface as much as I can.
Unfortunately, it's still not possible. So yeah, that's the other side. No records can be displayed since the entity is not enabled for notes or activities.
Oh. Yeah.
So there is ability to enable entities for notes and activities and posts. Once they are enabled, then this timeline gives a very nice and modern timeline view of the activity. So, for example, in the sales scenario, or any other for that matter, if you're working with a contact, you can have emails, tasks, phone calls, appointments related to those activities. So here you go, enable for activities. And that is definitely one of the out-of-the-box advantage for managing those items. If that sort of functionality is required, build anything like that in the Canvas app would be it would be a pain.
Yeah, I think that, as you say, It's things that you can get in a model-driven app and CDS that, if you were to build them from scratch, that would be a lot of work, a lot of effort. And yes, they might not all be perfect, what's there, but you're saving yourself an awful lot of time just by using what's available out of the box here.
And also, just as a takeout from the session in general, I think if these can be built custom, as well as this is what most of Dynamics 365 applications are based on. So if you learn these, you will have a lot better knowledge of what the first-party applications are about. However, first-party applications have got already business logic that is built in and has got plenty of additional items. Now, that's the biggest difference. The business logic that is built in the first-party apps for Dynamics, which are using model-driven, they can be very useful, and some people try to replicate them other ways. But then the question is it worth the effort always? So you always check the price against the effort and also supportability on the back end of it, because Microsoft do support and enhance those features constantly.
Yeah, so email, I can add a task.
So yeah, these are the activity entities, and that is another deep hole to go into. I would suggest if you could. It did not create enable for notes, but if you created for notes, notes could be added. And if you just pay a quick attention at the beginning of where they are and what those items are, the task and the email, they've got different icons. They've got their own statuses. They've got the due times. There's plenty additional more functionality in there.
Lots of things that you can do. So what do people think of model-driven apps in the CDS?
It does look like a very interesting tool to have to spend some time delving into. But yeah, really comprehensive.
I have one question, Alan or Larry. If we want to have some custom features, so is there only way that is through PCF only we deploy, or is there any other way?
Well, so custom features into the app.
Model-driven app, yes.
PC, I guess there have been various different ways that you've been able to do it over the years. So you'll probably hear a lot about plugins if you've ever looked at Dynamics. Plugins were one way to add things in. You can put, as I say, JavaScript files in. So it depends what you want to actually change. PCF is probably the way of the future, but I believe, and Larry, you might know more on this.
Right. So
there are some limitations of PCF at the moment.
There's in terms of custom elements now, plugins. Is purely to drive the logic, custom logic that is not available to be set up out of the box, and then there are certain elements that you will be able to do, of course, out of the box with flow, with workflows or other elements, business process flows, business rules, actually, which you have not shown, I think. So those are the logic elements. Now, in terms of visual elements, things like iframes can be added to do certain things, but the iframes have got very limited supportability, so you can write your HTMLs and then call back to into the elements on the system. But as Al mentioned, it's PCF controls now. That is the modern way of supporting it, which allows actual visual elements as well as functional elements to deal with data. In terms of limitations, there's always limitations. I'm not a developer, wouldn't be able to give the actual details of how much there are of those, but they are coming along all the time, and always check what community does, and there's plenty of information available there. In terms of PCF, I would, if anybody is interested, first of all, disclaimer, I would advise to check out Scott Duro and Ivan Fitzko, the MVPs of the community. They are kings of the PCF controls at the moment.
But one question, like, see, in Power Apps portal, like we do have option for using liquid templates for our own visuals. We do our own customization. So, those kind of liquid templates, can we use it as a plugins, and we can integrate that with a couple of visual features while we working on model-driven app?
No. Liquid templates, you're only reading data from the actual CDS and exposing that on the portal. So model-driven app does not change from whatever you do with liquid templates. And to be frank, the actual portal, whenever you deploy the portal, you get a model-driven app to manage the portal anyway. So you can customize those to a certain degree, but the advice is that if you are using first-party app, whichever app that would be, customize it cautiously and then to a certain limit, because when you get to the point where you have to customize it a lot, then it becomes it can break effectively the first-party app, and then you end up calling out to Microsoft, and they will tell you that it's your own fault for breaking it.
No. Yeah.
So yeah, whatever you do in the portal does not reflect what you do in model-driven apps, and it cannot be reused.
Okay, got it. So only way is either through visuals or whatever we do with PCF or any other things, or use business flows for customize anything for any functional related. That's the only option.
It really depends on the requirement. In terms of visuals, there's less options to do so. In terms of functional, it's about the plugins, utilizing whatever tools available. So first of all, try and use the out-of-the-box ones, the business process flows, the workflows, the business rules, and then look into the code custom ones of plugins or custom actions.
Yep, thanks. I think got fair enough vision on what needs to be done for the customization. Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, lots to learn and understand on this subject.
I honestly think that I was doing training the other week on 3 entities system that I have deployed for customers, and it took us half a day, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're doing similar sort of thing for tech people who have got more
questions.
Yeah, and quite naturally, it's just not enough. So there's a lot more to learn.
Yeah, and this is at dummy level. This is my level. So yeah. Cool. And it was Ivan Ficko and Scott Darrow, wasn't it? PCF.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, Alan, that's been absolutely. It's been really interesting. Fantastic talk. Yeah, something that I've wanted to hear about a lot. And thank you for taking us through. Just giving us an introduction to it all.
Oh,
There's a lot to get through.
I'm just glad Larry was here to pick up the more difficult questions for me.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
I was probably meant to do a presentation on similar sort of thing about 2 years ago.
Yes, I've been badgering you. Yeah, but, you can take us to the next level, eh?
Possibly we need to try and make an arrangement. Yeah.
The 400 level one.
No, sorry, I'm not a developer. Don't go 400. 300 is the most.
Right. So we generally now, if anybody wants to stay around, we generally get something to drink and meet up in a few minutes and just have a chat about what's going on and shoot the breeze around Microsoft 365 and anything else which comes into the discussion. So should we go off and do that? Grab a drink and then meet in about 5 minutes or so?
Yep. See you back in a moment.
And thank you very much for those attending who are heading off. We have the next session is the 17th of November. We've got a new speaker who's going to talk about Project Oakdale. And if anybody fancies doing a session for us, the thing we really sort of feel like we are quite a friendly user group and perfect if you want to try out a talk or we'll definitely support you if you want to do that and try out a talk for the first time. So please reach out to us for a meetup.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for having me. I have to drop off. I need to go get some dinner now. So, but yeah, Oakdale. When's that? 17th of November, did you say?
Yes, that's right.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. I might pop in for that one.
You'd be welcome.
That'd be great. Ryan, 5 minutes.
See you with a glass in my hand.
Okay. Cheers.
Right.
Cheers.
Thank you, everybody. I will pass. I've got a few more arrangements, but it was nice to see you all and see you next time.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks a lot.
For your time.
Well, it looks like everyone's just about left. A couple of people still on. That was really interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was good stuff.
Have you had a play around with that, Dylan, and model driven
No,
stuff?
I haven't actually. Well, ironically, years ago, I did some Dynamics work back when it was called CRM.
Yeah.
And you can see it's all the same entities. And I use Dynamics a lot at the moment, and I can see it's the same user interface. So, which is definitely an improvement over the old dialogue one, but it's still a little bit clumsy in places, I think.
Yeah. I remember doing some SharePoint integration with Dynamics. What were we using? Oh yeah, that was web services, ASMX web services into that was InfoPath actually, InfoPath integration to CRM. So you could like choose companies from drop down. But it was really it's interesting how how much stuff is in there. It's crazy. I mean,
yeah, no, it's a lot in there, but I can't help feeling that it's slightly clumsier than a nicely done model app. Sorry, than a nicely done Canvas app, because have you ever filled in a large amount of data sometimes with Dynamics? It's you filled one thing in, then you have to fill something else, you have to save that, then you go back to that. It's very sort of all over the place, the flow.
Yeah, I do find that a bit with the modern SharePoint interface. It feels clunky. You're tabbing through stuff and it's waiting, saving, taking you back to the control again. You're tabbing it. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's one. Yeah, it's one thing that does a lot of stuff, so it's going to be a generic product, so you're going to have a little bit of that, but it does feel clumsy, and I've noticed some users have said that, and I can't fully disagree with them.
Problem isn't it when you try to no it's fine, it's like, oh no, yeah, you're right,
yeah, you're right. But you can't say that when you're selling something to them, but you have to concede underneath. You say, well, it's a very generalized tool.
yeah
You say to yourself, would Apple make something like that? And the answer is probably not.
Yeah. No, I don't know how they can improve that. I am intrigued by the PCF stuff as well. I've got a customer at the moment, and they want they basically want to be able to have a big map of their park on a Power App. And there's none of the tool set really does it, and I'm thinking, well, a PCF would be the way to go. You could, because they want to be able to sort of do gestures and move it around and things, and I'm thinking, well, I wonder if you can wrap a nice image control, JavaScript image control in a PCF control to handle that. I'm sure the answer is yes, but
could you not have a full page SPFX, and you can pretty much do anything you like inside that?
Yeah, but they've already, they've got, it's one of those things, it's a requirement which has kind of come in, and they've gone, oh, we'd like to be able to do this. So they've already, invested heavily in Power Apps. So they're using the Power App to do other things, to manage their estate. So this is then, something else to have, especially if they can kind of say, you can have like the lots marked out and things like that. So kind of go, I've got to go to LO5, and they can zoom around and find where that is. But you could do it with SPFX, I guess. Other stuff.
You're pretty close to having full control there, aren't you?
Yes.
As close as you ever get inside the walled garden of one of these platforms.
Yeah. I have to say, that's the thing. The biggest thing which concerns me with Oakdale is just some of those, like InfoPath. You could do so much in InfoPath, and then if you really want to do anything else, you have to go into code and start, but at least you had that option. Whereas with Oakdale, I can see, you're going along and getting to a certain point, and then suddenly, right, do you know what? We've got to go to the common data service, and and it's a completely different conversation. particularly when you start talking about licensing and all that aspect. So yeah,
which might be the intention, of course.
I'm sure absolutely, of course. Yeah, I bet it must be. It's as we talked about before, it's the gateway drug, isn't it? So but yeah.
Although the thing is, the interesting conversation you can have with customers is, if you can do something that does half of what you do and it's ready in a week or 2 weeks, is that actually a really good solution? Because at the moment the world's changing so quickly. If you wait 6 months for something that does 90% of what you do, but suddenly there's a national lockdown when you're 2 weeks into the project.
And you look at the way that businesses are having to pivot to be able to be sustainable and to have that digital resistance. It's something like the Power Platform, it enables that, doesn't it? And enables you to suddenly change how your business works much more quickly than if you'd spent 12 months custom developing everything and you all out and change again.
Yeah, you imagine if you'd gone to write we've actually had that with one of our customers, that they've had a custom app that's been deployed to a mobile app that's been deployed to app stores and gone through all the certification and all that sort of stuff. And then some business rules changed because of COVID, and the effort required to make a small change to one of the UI screens just to allow for something that the government has introduced a new rule is enormous. Whereas a Power App, it's a relatively trivial job, although the ALM story is horrific. In fact, it's all too easy to change. So the problem is there is no ALM story.
I was having a look at that the other day, because whenever we do anything, everything's driven through Azure DevOps. Just because it saves my sanity so many times, especially deployments and things. But the sort of the Power Apps stuff, it's just so far away from being what you need it to be. It seems to be that they pick. I suppose it's they picked this stuff which is I would say is easy. So I'm sure it'll come along. So it must do. But it's a shame that it's not along further.
Although the thing is, to make it suitable for citizen developers, you have to cut out all the complexity. And as soon as you add the ALM, then you've lost the complexity. Sorry, you've gained this complexity that puts off the citizen developers. It's actually quite hard to have both.
Yeah. Have you done? Have you tried sort of moving SharePoint forms or SharePoint Power Apps around? Or SharePoint form Power Apps, like custom forms built in Power Apps. Have you ever moved those around from one tenant to another?
I haven't, but we scripted some of those, so effectively you can fire the script in multiple places. That's the other way of doing it, isn't it? Rather than moving something, you automate the creation so you can fire it out to multiple places. But
okay, that's interesting. Yeah. I tried maybe a couple of years ago, and I couldn't get it working, and then I've just managed to do it last week. There's what's the guy's name? There's an MVP. I'll find the link, and he takes you through the process. And you sort of export. You export the solution out, and then you have to open it all up and change a few.
You have to edit the code yourself, which that's one of our guys was saying, and it's like one mistake and you can wreck it, and it's just fragile, isn't it? I suppose you could automate it in the pipeline. I suppose
that's what I was thinking. That would make life so much easier if you can automate it and just make sure you get that right, and then you just know that I've got to pass in, the list name and the URL. I think that you've got to keep the names the same, but the list name and the URL, and then you've got some script which does it. At least then you're not going to get it wrong. And it'd be fair enough, you might mess it up a few times when you're testing it out. But the other thing you have to do is you have to delete the form in the destination library as well, which is a little bit scary, I think. if it doesn't work, then yeah, we'll have to just rebuild this manually. But
yeah, when you're doing that into a live environment, it's not
that's
quite so fun.
no. But I guess if you had it scripted and you can test it enough and feel comfortable, then I suppose you sort of mitigate that risk.
Yeah. I mean, it's the two ways of doing it. Is it, do you copy objects from one place to another, or do you just script the creation so you can create it in multiple places?
Yeah. So how does that work then? You script the creation and then and then you sort of go through. Does that go from a sort of a base app, and then you start adding in the controls and changing the controls, or yeah, I'm quite intrigued by that.
I can't remember exactly what we've done, but in general, we've tried to go for the principle of trying to script all our environments as far as possible.
Yeah.
So you can build a page through script and stick your controls on and things like that. And so
right, okay. Oh, but not this is not for a Power App. This is for SharePoint.
Stuff. We haven't done it with we haven't done it with Power Apps yet, but in general, the principle I've tried to instill on people is that we should always script everything we can.
Yeah.
But whether or not we could actually make that happen there, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's just that again, I like this idea of being this lazy developer, really, where you do something once and you script it and make sure it's repeatable, and it saves you bacon, doesn't it? It's like how many times if you've done in the past where you've gone, we're all ready to go, and then it's always, oh no, this isn't working. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to click that checkbox, and yeah.
The maddening bit though is it's the last 5% of functionality will take you most of the time in the script to write.
Yeah. No, this is it.
And we've also found sometimes when you script things, it used to be a case with Classic, and it does happen with this, is this subtle timing thing. So you add a whole bunch of things with script and it won't come out the same each time you run it.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've noticed that weird thing that we were building pages, putting web parts onto pages, and we'd find that sometimes if you ran them, you'd get slightly different results just because there must be some timing stuff going on there or something, that you fire off a whole load of commands and it's like they happen at different times. So you actually end up with things that you didn't expect. I can't remember the exact instance, but we've seen it a few times where the same script should in theory run on a fresh install exactly the same each time, and it just doesn't. Yeah.
That's the link. That's the chap. Positive. Yeah. He's done a few stuff on the Collab 365. He was talking. I think GlobalCon 4, GlobalCon 3 as well. I think.
This is the guy that ran SharePoint Saturday Warsaw, actually.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. Yes, because I got a cookie from him. A piece of chocolate came through the post.
I saw you got some. You got something on Twitter. You got a swag bag. That's cool, isn't it? That's very nice.
Yeah, it's always nice to get that.
Yeah. Oh well, he did that. That is. I was very happy when I saw that.
Yeah. No, I'll take a look at that.
So, this chap who's going to do the Oakdale one. Can we ask him to send over some details of what he's talk about, and I'll get that published, and then I'll have a chat with, because I hope Paul was going to be on this talk on this session, so I could have a chat with him and see if I can move him back a couple of weeks. But I liked if we can get these two.
They complement each other, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And then the OneDrive deployment, we can sort that out. And then, but if we can get them all published, then people kind of, I want people to start seeing a runway of talks. I think I think that's really good to do. It makes us seem like we're organised and everything,
It does. In fact, I've got the title and his name. I'm asking for Pracy. I'm just going to cut and paste it in now.
Okay, cool.
And he is from Sri Lanka, obviously. Actually, the title, let me just cut and paste that again, because Teams is so bad at copying and pasting. You can't see where his name ends.
Yeah, don't worry. I remember
Yeah.
now the guy's name. Yeah.
Oh, it's done it again. Stupid Teams. Yeah, but his name is definitely going to fill up his sort of Varchar Max territory.
Okay, cool. Right, so
There we go.
we're at number 14. Do you think we'll make a year's worth of?
I think, well, realistically, are we going to be back to in session by March? Probably not. Maybe the summer. Who knows?
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think we need to give ourselves some sort of reward for it because we've kept going, and everybody else has sort of faded away back to bi-monthly or less even.
Yeah.
Although you might say that we've stolen all the oxygen, haven't we? Because we've had so many different sessions that we've nobody else has had a chance.
Yeah, no, it's been good. It's hard work though.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, so yeah, the 17th we are. Okay, so we start on 7. Cool. Right, I'll pop that in as a draft, and then we'll.
Yeah, and we should make the 2nd December one just a quiz and fun thing, really. I think.
Cool. Let me just save as draft.
Just looking at it right now.
I'll reach out to Paul now and then see if we can get him booked in. So, Dylan, do you guys do you generally do fixed price bids, or do you do time and materials, like, or maybe a cap time and materials?
We typically go fixed price.
You do, yeah.
Yeah, but there's certain things that you don't want to touch with fixed price, and migration would be the first one you'd think of.
Yeah.
So, because obviously if you go for tenders, you have to do effectively it's fixed price because your tender has a price.
Yeah.
And
so how do you guys sort of mitigate your risk of getting that time right? Do you have you built up like a spreadsheet of things where you kind of go, right, well, I always remember I did some work with Accenture, and they had a spreadsheet. They would kind of go, right, this solution is 5 ASP.NET forms, and so each one you will say that's X number of hours. And yeah,
what we do in theory is there's a couple of different ways to doing it. You would